That's good. Then I'll let her do it. Go ahead, Linda.
You know what to do, Linda?
Just click the colored one.
The got it button. You got it.
Yeah, that was easy.
Adios, everyone.
Bye, Johnny.
John.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, here comes Allison, just in time. Hello, Allison. You're just in time. We're just starting right now. So,
Perfect.
okay, we're going to be on page 65, the 9th letter. So we finished the 8th letter last week. And jump into the 9th letter.
What page, Dave?
65.
65, okay.
It doesn't actually have a page number. So look for 64 and then look to your right. How about that?
I don't.
We can
Yeah.
do this. We can do this. Okay, before we dive in, anything that anyone wants to bring up from last week or the intervening week? Any old business? Okay, sounds like we're good to go. So the last letter, he was talking to the Reverend Mother that he's been talking to on and off, and he has an ongoing relationship with. He's talking to her again this time. All right. So this is going to say the same Reverend Mother. And he's going to talk about another person that they both know. So he says, here is a reply to the letter I received from our good sister N. Please give it to her. Okay, so we don't have that letter. We only have the letter that he's writing to the Reverend Mother, but obviously enclosed in it was another letter that he was giving to this sister. She appears to me to be full of goodwill, but she wants to go faster than grace. I love that line. Now, the other translation was, she wants to go faster than grace will allow. And so that was kind of interesting as well. One does not become holy all at once. The other translation was, one does not become a saint all at once, but you get the idea. I recommend her to you, or I commend her to your care. We ought to help one another with our advice, and still more by our good examples. So Francis of Assisi comes to mind there, right? Preach the gospel continuously, use words where necessary. We ought to help each other with our advice, with our words, and still more by our good examples. I would be obliged if you will let me hear of her from time to time, and if she is very fervent and obedient. I love these little windows, I guess, into the real relationships that stand behind these letters. You know, when we read these letters from 300 years ago, 400 years ago, and they're kind of in stilted English, we forget that they're real, breathing, living, red-blooded relationships with real people behind them, just like any relationship that we would have. And so trying to, hi Danielle, trying to help each other, writing letters and asking to hear. I mean, this is all just so human, isn't it? I mean, it's what we do every day, all day long with our friends and with the people around us. And so he wants to hear from her from time to time. So here we have a younger sister that is probably under the Reverend Mother's care. So she's probably a part of the convent that the Reverend Mother oversees. And she also is trying to get on the Brother Lawrence bandwagon. She's trying to learn to practice presence. She's trying to learn contemplative practice. And he's been helping her. So now he's got a letter that he's giving her. But I love this line. She appears to me to be full of goodwill, but she wants to go faster than grace will allow. You know, isn't that just like, especially a young person, you know, they want to hurry up the process. Come on, what's going on? And she's got to be showing him some frustration, some impatience, I suppose. And here is Brother Lawrence, who is now, what did we say, late 60s at this point, 70-ish? And he knows after 40 years of doing this exactly how this works. It can't be hurried. You can't hurry it along. You know, this is not about acquisition, again, where you go and you get something by the throat and make it yours. And most importantly, or maybe just as importantly, it's not about self-development. And this is a tough one because we tend to think even of our contemplative practice and our spiritual formation as self-development, that we're going to take ourselves to our our highest self. We're gonna take ourselves to a greater level of consciousness or whatever. But the real key to understanding contemplative practice is that it's not about that kind of acquisition. It's not about developing the self. In fact, it's about deconstructing the self. And that is so important for us to understand. If you're trying to develop the self, then you're still working out of the ego consciousness. You're still working out of a first half of life understanding or consciousness. The relinquishment goes the opposite direction of everything that we think we're supposed to be doing. And so if we're trying to hurry this thing along, if we're trying to get to an outcome, get to, I don't know, a level that we imagine is where we're supposed to be as we're doing this, that's the antithesis of everything that we're supposed to be doing. Brother Lawrence goes on and on about, and he's going to say it later in this letter, or maybe it's the next one. I read them both this afternoon. He's going to go on and on about how we're doing this for the sake of God's presence alone and for no other reason. It's just simply an abandonment and a connection with God's presence. There's no other agenda. There's no other there. This doesn't lead to something. This is that something in and of itself. Does that make sense? Because it's on one hand, it's kind of a fine distinction, but on the other hand, it's everything. If our attempts to come to contemplative prayer, centering prayer, whatever we're doing, is for the purpose of something else down the road, then we're missing the whole purpose of why we are in the prayer itself. It is an end in itself in that respect.
Dave, it's hard to gauge for me what this is about because there doesn't feel like there's any response from God's silence. And so I'm trying to work through the fact that Brother Lawrence or you or anybody else says, you say that the presence is there. And so I'm going off of what other people are saying, but to gauge that for myself and sense that is difficult when there's dead silence.
So are you expecting God to speak?
No, just to have some indication that he's there, that he's there. Like I told you the other day, I can see the order all around me. But what in me, I'm like, am I just imagining this? Am I just rehearsing what I'm told I'm supposed to be practicing? Like it seems like all of life is kind of like that, other than just waking up in the morning with a decent attitude as best you can. What's this about? It's hard to get your arms around it at all.
So,
and I would think it's easy enough to do that in, Los Osos. But how do you find that space when you're in a war zone or something like that, or you're surrounded by death and destruction and so on and so forth?
Allison, were you going to say something? You really moved in there, like the purpose there.
I just kind of giggled, and it was maybe an inappropriate giggle.
Justin.
No.
Oh.
Hold on a
Huh?
second.
No,
let
I
me
thought I
mute, let me
heard
mute John. Okay, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no. It was just because I think, was it last week we were talking about, like, I think it was the week before actually, talking about how it was tough to find, being in a situation. It was the young man going to war. I think that was last week. And
Yes, it was. Yeah.
yeah, and we were talking about, Brother Lawrence was telling him to like stay present and find God in the moment, and then there was a discussion of like, well, how do you do that when you are going to actively murder other people? So I had a slight inappropriate giggle. I'm sorry. That's what it was about. It's not funny at all. I'm sorry, Bill, because it's a really valid question you were asking about, like, what is God? What is it? What are we looking for? What is this feeling or this experience to be present with God? What is that?
Wow.
What does it feel like? What are all these things? I think they're really valid questions, and I love when that comes up, Because Bill, even last week, he brought up a statement last week that was just really profound, because getting to hear everybody's beliefs or how they experience God is really cool for me in general. So, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm gonna stop talking now.
So Bill, what would you be looking for? What would be a signal to you that God was present?
I don't know. At this moment, I don't know when he's silent.
Mhm.
I can't discern between what I may be imagining and his realness.
And see, so for me and for everything that we have been trying to gather around here is that God is always silent. You know, God doesn't speak in English. So when we are really approaching God, we're approaching silence. That's the native language, right? And so if we want to really speak to God, we're going to need to speak in silence. And so it's silence that we're really after, not the speaking. The speaking has already come through our conscious minds, our egoic minds. We're somehow translating that silence into words. I don't know exactly how that works. I know the Spirit gives us promptings, but really God's presence is silent. And so I'm never looking for a word. I used to, because everybody would tell me what God had told them, and I was waiting to hear from God too in English. I wanted to hear God's voice and hear what he was telling me to do. But I came to realize through contemplation that that's not the way he works. And so many of the actual centering prayer sits that I did, you know, didn't feel like anything significant happened. But I did feel a sense of, I don't know, just less anxiety, I suppose, more centeredness, a little more serenity, maybe. There was sometimes a real sense that everything was as it should be, everything was in its right place, but there was nothing specific, there was nothing cognitive. But outside of those sits is when things started to come into focus. Things started to happen. I started to become aware of more stuff. It was outside of the sits that I really started to put things together and see why I still acted the way I did, why the stone was still not smooth, why I was triggered in the way that I was. Some of those things started to make sense to me. And over time, I started to feel that I was making progress, usually from the sides. I would enter a situation that used to trigger me and it didn't, and I realized I was making progress, or someone would say that there's something different about me, but I didn't feel the change so much myself. But it was just continuing to show up. I know Brother Lawrence is always talking about these great ecstasies that he feels and all the joy that God gives him. Well, that really wasn't my experience. I didn't have those kinds of ecstasies, but I did have a growing sense of peace where there was so much anxiety before. And that was a gradual process. When I left some of the meditational sits or the centering prayer sits, I would tend to journal. And that would be the next step. I had a little thing I did. I ran and prayed while I ran. I sat and cooled down and did a centering prayer. And then I'd go upstairs and I'd usually write in the journal. And in the journal, stuff was just firing. And as I go back, you know, some of those journal entries ended up in The Fifth Way, the book. But so much of the stuff that was coming up that I wasn't even aware of would end up down on the paper. That was another indication to me that something was going on, because I was thinking about things and putting things together that I didn't have before. But it wasn't something in the sit itself that felt like God downloading to me. That was not my experience, although some of the mystics will have their visions and this and that. So I think it has to do with what you're looking for, that may make you feel disappointed, or that your expectations are not being met. And I think part of that is clearing the decks of all of that, just like you're trying to clear the decks in the sit itself, is try to clear the decks of your expectations and just see what comes. I know that doesn't sound particularly satisfying, right, Bill?
Well, I don't think I have, I'm not feeling like there's expectations or that I'm trying to define that. It's just very intangible. And the only way I can relate to it is trying to be more aware of the way that Jesus is trying to demonstrate, and I get this from a lot of the things you've shared, is that he's showing us the way, and to keep trusting that that is the optimal design for me as an individual or for anyone else. And looking for, I guess, ways to live in a way that's more in tune with what I feel is God's design in a lot of ways. And even at that, I don't know what that is. There's definitely been times in my past where I've felt that clarity. But then again, not so sure. God didn't have me go through things thinking it was my clarity and that he was the one talking to me, but it really was him just putting me through, or life putting me through the ropes and exposing areas within myself that have needed further honing and developing. But the silent part, this practicing, whether it's practicing a daily quiet time or practicing journaling or practicing quieting and being still, the quieting and being still, other than just clearing out all the other stuff that's swimming around all the time in the head, there's a benefit to that. But I don't have a very good sense of how to sense God in the midst of that.
Well, let me just posit this. If you walk away from anything feeling disappointed or frustrated, I suppose, it's because you had an expectation. That's the only way you're going to feel that, is that an expectation was not met. That's why you feel the disappointment or the frustration, or that something is wrong.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking you're coming into this with some sort of expectation. Now, if it's because of the clarity that you felt previously at different times in your life, and you're not feeling that clarity now, that would be the expectation, that somehow this process is going to give you that sense of clarity or a little more certainty or whatever it is. I think as we go further into the spiritual process, certainty actually becomes less and less of a part of it all. It's like John of the Cross, who talked about that dark night of the soul. He talked about the dark ray of faith. As he got further and further into his contemplative journey, he said his faith got purer and purer to the point that it was completely invisible. He called it a dark ray. It was like the safety net that he imagined before, earlier in his spiritual life, was removed, and there was just nothing there. And yet it was still there. It's just he couldn't feel it or sense it the way he imagined he did before. So our certainty is an illusion. There really isn't that kind of certainty, not the cognitive certainty that we crave, because of all of the things that are in play in our lives at any given time. Bill, go ahead.
It seems like he did have a result in his life in being more settled with the fact that God was around him. It was no longer him driving the train, but there seems to be a result to his practicing God's presence in his life.
For Brother Lawrence?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's kind of what I'm I guess digging for, in a sense, is and you kind of described it a little bit earlier. You said, you felt more settled, you felt more at peace. So to me, that's describing a result of practicing God's presence.
There is, but it wasn't something that I felt necessarily in the meditational or centering prayer sits themselves, not in the prayer time itself. It was something cumulative that was growing as I continued to show up for this.
As a result of.
But I also think, and this is something we were going to talk about later in the letter, but might as well bring it up now, is that one of the things that I think is happening with Brother Lawrence, and since he started from such humble beginnings and he didn't have any expectations about himself except that he was a screw up. I mean, that's really the only thing that Brother Lawrence understood about himself, is that he was less than, he was a screw up, he was a big clumsy lummox, and there really wasn't anything that he was bringing to the table. So he had a pretty low opinion of himself. So it wasn't a far stretch for him to really let go of the egoic expectations or the ambitions of the ego. In fact, it was going the other way for him as he was getting all this attention from God in terms of presence. You know, he felt he didn't deserve it. But I think what happens in contemplation is we get that sense of peace as we're able to let go of the pressure that we put on ourselves to perform. When we realize that really isn't a quotient in all of this, that isn't part of the equation, that we need to perform and do something specific in order to be, you know, fill in the blank of whatever it is you're looking for, loved, accepted, saved, that it's there because that's who God is. When that starts to sink in, I think that's where the peace starts to come from, because it's not on your shoulders anymore. It's not something you need to do in order to. And I think that's exactly what he's talking about when he talks about the fact that you're doing this for the sake of God's presence alone and not for any other reason. It's not there's another there out there. It's just all contained in this moment. And that takes the pressure off. You know, the best I guess I can explain it to you is that every time I would get up to perform music, up until, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, I would be nervous about it. And especially when I first started coming to this evangelical church and they stuck me in the worship team, I got to play in the worship team. I was really nervous every Sunday that I would get up to play or anything that I would do. And then finally the realization set in is that, you know, it really doesn't matter. You know, there's no there out there. This isn't going to leapfrog into any kind of career or being found by scouts. And this group of people, I could have the worst day or the best day and they would feel about the same about it. You know, it was all in my mind. And when I turned it around and just realized this wasn't about my performance and what it might lead to, that it was only a self-contained moment that lasted as long as the notes were ringing in the air. And then all of that nervousness and all of that anxiety left. And I could just show up and play because it was just contained in the moment. And I think that's the clearest I can come to trying to explain what I think is going on here, both in Brother Lawrence, but also in anyone who perseveres in contemplative practice, is that the peace is coming from the lack of needing to prove ourselves, I guess, maybe, if that helps at all.
The one thing I can't ever get away from is just the work of it. That there's something about getting myself to the point where I embrace the work of quieting myself, of disciplining myself to be present and be mindful and be aware of and stopping my cycling. But that doesn't happen by my laying in bed. It's what you keep saying. It's like you have to keep showing up. And the more I can embrace that, it's not like I'm earning anything. It's just a basic requirement in a sense of spiritual growth. Not achieving anything, but getting to that point where I'm willing to allow that discipline, I guess, to play itself out in my life, no matter what gets thrown at me.
So are you saying this is a conflict for you?
No, I'm saying for me, it's boiling down to the work of it.
Okay.
Work of life. It's like, I wish life wasn't as hard as it is.
Yeah, we all wish that.
Right. And everybody feels that. And if I don't embrace the work of just getting out of bed and getting myself in a position to be able to experience life in a fullness, or however it's intended, and however to get through it in a way that's connected to God, it just doesn't there's something about it that takes effort. And if I'm not willing to do that, I'm not going to bring God into my life more than what he is already, but I'm going to raise my awareness by far that will strengthen me to be able to navigate life as it presents itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, you see, it sounds to me like you're answering your own question, but I'm not sure if you see it that way.
No, I do. I think I just have such an aversion to hard work. I've kind of gone the opposite extreme. I've kind of embraced it so hard that it's become, I don't know, it's hard to slow down now that I've sort of retired, it's just a different experience.
The Chinese have a phrase, wei wu wei, that some of you may be familiar with, and it literally means do not do. And so it's doing by not doing. Very, very Zen thing, right?
Hey,
But-
Bill. I
Yeah.
just had a thought. I've struggled also with trying to format time specifically, for quiet time. It's been tough for me to do that too, in a more regimented way. But as an example, today, for whatever reason, no expectations, I woke up early and I wanted to just move. So I got my rear end out of bed and I went down to the beach and I walked. I did put music in my ears and I walked. It was cold and chilly and it was kind of spritzy rainy, but the surfers were out and it was gray and not very many people were there because it was kind of early. I didn't have to talk to anybody. It wasn't a lot of stopping and chatting, it was really quiet. And it was really a good walk. And I think like you were saying, Dave, I felt really at peace. And maybe just whatever anxieties were growing just kind of were at bay for a while. And I didn't think anything about it. And I came back and I said, I think I just had a God moment this morning. And it was sort of when it just happened. I didn't really plan it that way. It wasn't like it was intended to be this moment or anything, but it just turned out that way. And I liked it. It's kind of like I like those kinds of experiences where maybe I don't really plan them that well and it just happened that way. So maybe that's what you're referring to, like when you just go for a bike ride and you just start to feel the rush a little bit and that's your quiet time. Maybe.
I think that's the root of it. But like you
It
said,
didn't feel like work. You're right.
get out of bed. That was the work part,
That is the hard part.
right? The work part was that first move.
That's right.
Can y'all hear me? Am I coming through?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I wanted to make that point about Wei Wu. It's doing without doing. You're doing something, but it doesn't feel the same as the things that we do normally when we're working towards something and we're trying to get it and we're fighting. It's a working towards something. Yes, you have to get up. Yes, you have to be present, but in the doing of it, it's still relinquishment. It's still a pushing off and letting go. It's a different feel to it, and it changes everything. And it took me forever to get that, even conceptually, anywhere close to reality. And obviously it took Brother Lawrence 10 years before he started to feel comfortable in what he was doing as well. So it does take some time, but it has just has a different feel to it. Judy, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I'm really interested in this discussion because it's and I feel for you, Bill. It almost it struck me a little bit that, I know you're fresh into retirement, and it made me remember the days when I had just moved out of the workforce, and it evolved over a period of time, and I realized that my sense was that life had evolved in such a way that I kind of got the message that I wasn't meant to be in the workforce anymore, that God had a different plan for me. And I fought that for a while with different, job interviews and all of that. But so there's that piece of it, and I had a period in time where I really had to struggle with my identity that I had to relinquish. That I was only valuable if I was doing something productive at work and, helping to contribute to our comfortability as a family or what have you. And when fast forward to when we came to California, and I had a conversation with Dave because I I too has started to practice what this centering prayer and the silent meditation was all about. And I got frustrated too. I kept expecting an outcome of some kind. I didn't know exactly what that looked like, but um, I felt like I was floundering for a while, and it gave me a lot of comfort when Dave said, try to let go of that expectation that there will be something will happen while you're in those moments. And I was like, that gave me such a sense of relief. And yet it was facing the unknown for sure, because I had some singular experience, one in particular that I really intuited that I had heard his voice, um, kind of giving me a direction because I was falling to pieces. Um, and I was kind of angry at him and God, and I said, tell me, do I do this or do I do that? And he gave me the answer that I didn't want to hear. And yet at the same time, um, I had to struggle with that a bit and come to terms with it. But the practicing the presence of God, I think for me, has evolved into just trying to let go, to commit the time, to realize that it's going to be different from yesterday. It could be the same as yesterday. It sometimes there might be a better sense of, peace that arises out of that or not. But I was slowly starting to be able to embrace that journey of what it was and what it wasn't, and to let go of whatever feelings or judgments I had about it. And I have found that over an extended period of time, I'm I'm better able, and not perfectly, a lot of times, not perfectly, but I am better able to accept the moments that come to me in life. And um, if I still have reactivity to them and don't like them, or, start getting resentful about it or what have you, I can pause, because the meditational practice has helped me gain that awareness, I think, of just being able to be present and to accept whatever comes,
Mm.
and be more comfortable with whatever it is, even though, there's part of me that's maybe a little disconcerted by it or fearful about it, or, the feelings can still be there, but I'm better able to just be okay that he's got me, and it's just things are gonna evolve in his time frame and in the way that may be surprisingly better than what I ever expected. Um, but it's almost a state of being. I don't know if that's the right way of describing it, but it's and it's come about. I mean, the meditational practice has been very central and integrated with all of the work that I I did engage in with Al-Anon, because they dovetail into each other, is what I'm finding. And there's a richness in the spirituality that I've just kind of immersed myself in. I'm struggling for words to put around this, I think.
Yeah, we're always struggling for words trying to express this stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Quick question. for Bill, and I like what Judy just said, and I resonated with that, but I wonder, is there any element of this that has to do with, you know, like the very existence of God itself, like that question, or that's not a struggle for you? It's more, is it more, is there anybody who is hearing me in silence, or is there anybody out there?
I, I think what I said earlier, that I see order and God all around me. But
Mm.
it's this, Dave, you kind of asked me this question, is it the nature of God that I'm grappling with? And it is the nature of God that I'm grappling with. And really trying to take a step back and kind of evaluate a little bit of what I've been telling myself through my life that I've been told to is good for me. Practicing whatever the discipline is, just pick out of a whole array of things.
Mhm.
And I feel the same way with reading Brother Lawrence, Practice the Presence. It feels like it's a spiritual discipline that is a key part of spiritual growth of my soul that helps me navigate through whatever life throws at me. And I'm no longer saying that God throwing at me or paving the way for, it's more he's providing me, I don't know if you call it maturity or spiritual development that allows me to take those things in stride, and practicing of the presence allows me to hear that or to settle myself. I'm still not hearing him, but
Mhm.
allows me at least to settle myself enough so I'm a little more sensitive to where
Mhm.
how to apply the things that I've learned through my life, that I believe God is there to kind of help give guidance. The Holy Spirit is there to kind of give sort of a prompting.
Mhm.
Mm,
Could it be that he's taken you on a new journey, Bill? That's
Well,
completely
of course it is. I mean,
unexpected.
I think
Yeah.
of, in corporate life, we did Strengths Finder, and many of you have probably done that, and so my top three are maximizer, achiever, responsibility, relator, and what the fifth one was.
Mhm.
So I'm
Activator.
like trying to, equate those to life now, and this feels like just going and getting in a rowboat, sitting out in the middle of the ocean and see where the wind blows me.
Right.
Kind of.
That's what it feels like.
So
It is what it feels like.
basically, you have established ways of striving for and relating to God, and this is another path that's not built on that skill set, essentially.
That, but I also have this deep down, I don't like work. I like play.
Right.
I want to play. I've got to work so that I can be responsible enough to pay my bills or do whatever that I need to be able to play.
Mm.
And I just wish I didn't have to work for it.
But in a real way though, if it's feeling like work, you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
That's
just
the
practicing the presence of the silence. It's this tension of equating it to what is it balance? What is it preparing you for? What is it in life that keeps getting thrown at us that practicing the presence is helping us in?
Mm.
I think Judy said that. It's like you can deal with circumstances in a way that you couldn't before. Without having to change the circumstances, you can deal with them better than you did before. The quality of your relationships changes because you can be more present than you were before.
But I
There's
think
going to be
that,
all those things.
don't you think that's though a part of being willing to let God shape you and being willing to learn from those experiences and allow yourself to be trained or matured or brought into a more of a spiritual fitness, emotional fitness, awareness of that has been a result of your paying attention and being willing to do the work that
Mm.
wouldn't happen if you didn't do the work. And you wouldn't even be, I mean, you'd still be sucking milk out of a bottle.
Right.
I'm not sure what you're getting at here. Are you saying that though what you just described stands outside of contemplative practice?
No, it's,
Oh, okay.
can't separate it from contemplative practice
Of course
because
not.
just the word practice means work to me.
Okay, but that's my point. There is something that you do, but that's why I brought up the Wu Wei concept. That's effortless effort. It's non-volitional work. That, you know, however you want to throw the words at it, it's this concept of that the effort that you put in is in concert with what's flowing, so that it doesn't feel like effort. You're not standing in a gale force wind anymore. You're moving with the flow. And contemplation puts you into that kind of process. Yes, you got to get out of bed in the morning. Yes, you got to show up. There are things that you need to do, but it shouldn't be done with the kind of anxiety or striving or you know, sense of need for control that we bring to our usual daily practice. It feels different than that.
Yeah, I agree.
And if
with
you're bringing that to it, then you're at odds with yourself.
you. I agree with what you're saying there.
Okay.
Mhm.
And it's slippery. I grant you that. It's something that you only work out in the practice. You know, as many words as we can throw at this, maybe it starts to give you a bit of a paradigm, but it doesn't make any sense until you've actually experienced what that feels like. And that
Right.
doesn't mean that you know, I'm not telling you I'm a completely adept at this, you know, my stone not yet smooth, but I understand a heck of a lot more than I did years ago just by doing this and realizing the difference between these two. Because I'm someone who is very anxious, you know, by my own light, and I'm always working to try to get this and get that. That's my nature. And to go against that took a lot of time. And but it's changing things. It's changing things for me. I am able to deal with things better than I did before. And as I'm watching so many people moving to retirement, you know, I'm realizing, you know, this is a whole different frontier. In fact, someone was just telling me 2 days ago, said he feels that life is pointless now because he's not doing anything. He's not offering anything. He's not helping anybody the way he did before and had that sense. And nothing he does is recognized by anyone, right? The stuff that he's doing now is invisible and nobody cares. Nobody's going to care if you get up for a sit in the morning. No one's going to care and give you a medal.
Mm.
It has to be coming from inside out. This is something you want to do for yourself.
Mm.
And realize that there isn't going to be the kind of recognition that you're used to if you do a good job.
Mm.
So it's so different. And yet
Yeah.
it's everything. You know, it feels like nothing and it seems insignificant, but it's everything. And it makes all the difference in the world as we move into second half of life, and especially as we are approaching our own death, you know, because when you're at that moment, you know, what's going to really be important? What's going to matter? And what is it that we really take with us? And these are the questions we're sort of answering in the little death of contemplation.
Yeah.
You know,
I
it
am-
is a sense of getting a new sense of meaning and purpose, I think. And, you know, that journey alone, when you're coming out of work and you're starting to feel that sense of uselessness or I'm not getting any recognition, I'm not doing anything of value that's getting I mean, it surfaces all of that ego stuff that we've been clinging to for so many years. And it's, you know, gives us those surges of adrenaline, and I'm important, I'm in control, I'm adding value here.
Mhm.
And when that goes away, I mean, there's a huge loss. And I think it can generate a brand new path, brand new, completely unfamiliar. Um, that is not loaded with all of those, you know, ego boosts for us. But
Absolutely.
boy, does it give rewards of
Mhm.
a whole different nature. Sorry, go
Mhm.
ahead, Marie.
Well, I just to I think you were a perfect segue there for me.
Good.
um, because where I was going with this is thinking about, like, we get addicted to our own thoughts. We get addicted. It's one of the first things we get addicted to is what we think. And I'm working with a guy who his sponsor told him he doesn't believe in God. So they were struggling with the 12 steps and the higher power or whatever. And his sponsor told him, all you need to know is that you're not God.
Nice. I like it.
And I really like that, right? Because we value our thoughts and our ego and what we think, and we put that on the altar before God. And it's the psychological value of silencing my thoughts is that I am not God. What I think, everything I thought got me to this shitty situation I'm in. Right? And it's in being able to relinquish what I think so that I can hear something else. And the consistent recognition that what I think is nonsense and has gotten me to the bottom of the bottle, right? It's there I can find God. It's when I come to the end of my own understanding, the end of my own rope, the end of my own whatever, that I can find this new thing. And I think that's the mini death that Dave was talking about there, right? The effort, the consistent, repeated effort to just put my thoughts down, my ego down, put all of that shit down.
Which is exactly what Jesus is constantly talking about, right? You know, what does it mean to pick up your cross daily? Deny yourself daily, not just once, daily. You're supposed to do this process of letting go. What is Paul talking about when the old man is dead and he's a new creature in Christ? I mean, these images are deep and enduring, and Jesus throws everything, every metaphor he can at it, you know, to try to get to the same place. That process William is describing, that Judy described, is exactly what this is all about, because we can't see reality if it's through the filter of our ego. God won't be like anything that we can imagine. And the harder that we're holding on to what we imagine, the more we're likely to walk right past God in search of what we imagine is God. And maybe that's what hell is. It's just our continuing search for what is in our head, rather than just seeing what's all around us. But at any rate, this has been, I hope, a really valuable conversation as we try to make these distinctions, because everybody's expression of their experience is just that. It's an expression, and it paints whatever picture it paints in our minds, which can be helpful or really off-putting. You know, just like, look at the next line. Let us often reflect, my dear mother, that our only concern in this life is to please God. Well, what does that sound to you if we just read it in English and put it through the filter of how we've been taught as Western Christians? You know, to me, that sounds like pay to play. That sounds like performance in order to get God's approval. You know, our only concern in this life is to please God. But what he's really talking about is entering into what God's pleasure is. See the distinction there? We're not pleasing God because we do something that God has deemed lawful or acceptable, and now he's happy with us because we performed well. We are entering into and taking pleasure in the same thing that God takes pleasure in. In other words, the sebyana, right? The will, the delight, the desire, the deepest purpose of God. We are entering into God's will because we're entering into the same things that God takes pleasure in. That's pleasing God. It's pleasing ourselves with the same things that please God. And so trying to interpret, translate the sayings here so that they actually are helping us to put the X over the treasure on our map and dig in the right spot is part of what these conversations are all about. What can anything else be but folly and vanity? You know, what can anything else be, as William would say it, but, you know, being addicted to your own thoughts, thinking that those thoughts and what you're addicted to is all there is, which is God, right?
Mm.
That is the
Sorry,
ultimate
Dave,
reality,
what-
is your own thoughts.
What letter are you on?
9th letter,
Okay,
page
thank-
65. What
Well,
can
maybe it's
anything
like
else be
what-
but folly and vanity? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, maybe it's like what you say, Dave, and what we read in Falling Upward is we're not acquiring so much in the second half of life, we're relinquishing, so we're deconstructing. So maybe a lot of what we're deconstructing are our own thoughts or our ego or pieces of our ego that we need to let go of as a part of this whole deconstruction.
Mhm.
That's got to be
That's
part of it.
exactly what it is. That's all that it is. I mean, you can really boil down Jesus' teaching to just that alone. Everything that Jesus teaching and so many of the stories and the images in the Gospels is about that. And what does it mean to leave your nets at the shore and follow Jesus? You know, that's leaving everything that your life has been about, your livelihood, everything, the rules that you play by. It's just dropping it all and following Jesus. I mean, this is what it's all about. The way to God is getting yourself out of the way of a God that's already here, already present, already loves you as much as you can possibly be loved and accepted and approved. It's just getting everything out of the way that obstructs that view. That's the way. That's what Jesus is trying to get us to do. But it's so terrifying for us to do that, because that is our lifeline. That's what we've hung on to all these years. This is what the world looks like. The world is pay to play, but spiritually, it's the exact opposite of that. And so how do we negotiate that? How do we balance those two realities in a human life? That is the way of Jesus. Balancing now and not yet, you know?
Yeah, I'd
Ellen?
like to add is because too, for us in the Western society, and I still have a few years before I retire, but I do know my sense of identity is so tied strongly to what I do, to my career. It is so strongly tied to it. So yeah, I'm saying if physically or mentally I cannot do what I need to do now, I have to find something where I feel that self-worth, because it is so tied to what I do. So now I'm telling myself I find joy in seeing the kids. So I tell myself, I brought up two beautiful girls. My sister, who's 10 years younger, she has her little kids. So the reinventing myself a few years from now is, it's also tied to, I need to be useful to help her, perhaps, and she's the one, you know, we're the ones helping my dad, okay, but that's also tied to our sense of purpose. So I have to go beyond that, even if what I do is not seemingly, you're not recognized, you're not paid for this, seemingly mundane, but the person I'm doing it to, it, like you said too, it could bring joy or happiness, and I'd like to be the vehicle of that. It doesn't have to be a formal recognition from my medical director, because who cares about him anyway? So I know this is being recorded.
We're going to send it to him.
No, I'm just saying too, is it's, although it's seemingly mundane, it's in the little things we do in life that can bring joy. Because somebody pointed out to me too, you know, here I am, I'm empty nester, and saying, you brought up these two beautiful girls. Thank God they're leaving, going to college.
Mm.
Because I do know of some where the child stays at home for many years, right? Yeah, but it's our identity and self-worth are so tied to it.
Mhm.
So I have to reinvent myself.
But that's the human condition, you know?
Yeah.
But what you're describing is all of us. There's not
Yeah.
one of us. I mean, let's face it, we do more for our careers and our jobs and our work. We spend more time with that than we do with anything else. You know, it's the sustenance of our families. And so how can we not be identified with that? How can we not be tied to that? How can we
Mm.
not see our self-worth in that? It's what makes us relevant and powerful and spectacular. The three temptations that Jesus had to face in the wilderness, that's what our work brings for us. And when that's taken away, either because we become sick or the business fails or we retire or whatever, that is an incredible loss to our ego. And it's a very difficult one to make the turn. Unless we have prepared ourselves, or unless then we embark on preparing ourselves to find a deeper value that wasn't apparent to us as we were existing on first half of life principles. See, Allison is way too young. She hasn't, she's not there yet.
I think my experience with life might be a little bit different though, because like I have had the whole performance based thing where I felt like I had to be a certain way and do a certain thing and perform in a certain manner. See, I don't personally right now, I don't believe, who knows, like 20 years from now, I might realize like, hey, maybe you actually did. But I don't see life right now in that kind of performance manner or having to be the best or achieve at the best, which is maybe why I'm not the best at the things that I do sometimes, but so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, but I appreciate what you brought up, Bill, and how you like the perseverance, because it seems like you're really wanting to I don't, it seems like you have your interest peaked, which is really great, and you're doing the work, and I commend that. I think that's really awesome. So I'm gonna stop talking here now.
I brought you up, Allison, just kind of half jokingly. I mean, you are the youngest person here, and it's great that you are interested in and looking at these principles now. But in truth, the second half of life is not chronological. It doesn't have to be. It depends on a person's life experience, just like you were saying. Your life experience has brought you here to actually be interested in these issues and pursuing them, which is great. And it's so rare for a person your age. But it's whatever gets us to the point that we're willing to try something completely different, and we're willing to keep showing up to something that doesn't give immediate gratification. Contemplation does not give immediate gratification. It's not going to do that. It's not geared that way. It's not supposed to. It's something that accrues over time. And so to be willing to keep showing up for that is part of the character change that is taking place. But it's a tough one, because we're dealing with the most basic things to our human nature and trying to change them. Crazy stuff. Well, this is like the old days where, we did about 10 lines and that's all we got further in the text. So,
whenever Bill drops by.
I know.
Judy. You'll be in trouble.
I was gonna say, if Frank was here, he'd be mocking me right now. And this is what he used to really jump on. But this was a really important conversation. So Bill, thanks for being our punching bag here, and thanks for being transparent about this, because what you're speaking is what everybody is thinking and what we're all going through. And so it's important to bring these things out. So thanks for doing that.
Mm.
Okay, we don't have Scotty again. He is not doing well. So just keep him, lifted up in your thoughts and prayers, because he said he had so much pain he couldn't really sit still. And I know Beth is hurting. So there's a few of our folks that are out. So we'll keep them all in prayer. In Scott's absence, would anyone like to close us in prayer? Linda was gracious enough to do it last night. Anybody else want to,
Well, I think Bill started this mess, so I think it ought to be Bill.
ooh,
Okay.
all right,
Okay.
Bill,
You
you're
brought
on.
us in, get us out, buddy.
All right.
Thanks, Mon.
Father, thank you for this group and thank you for the time that we can share like this and to just chew on the things that are being brought up in this book. Brother Lawrence learned centuries ago and that we're still grappling with. Lord, I thank you for the patience of this group, and I thank you for the kindness and the gentleness and the maturity and insights that are offered in this dialogue. Father, thank you for being with us, and thank you for tonight. Amen.
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 Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. All right, as
Thank
you
you.
were, we'll see you Sunday.
Hey,
Oh,
Vaughn,
man, I
where
wish.
are you?
How's that?
Where are you?
I'm right here. How are you?
I mean, where are you?
Oh, I'm still in Nashville. My eyes gotten a little bit worse, so I'm still getting treated for that. I found a little bit of melanoma in my ears. I got doing that tomorrow. So different things. Getting old.
Yeah, it happens to one of us. eh?
It's a bitch, man. Sorry, it's not being recorded, right? No recording.
No, we're still recording, so.
No. Well, life is interesting then, not that other word.
Be careful, the camera is still on.
Thank you. Hey,
All right,
Billy,
everybody.
remember that picture?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. I never felt as white as I did on that picture. My God, that place is so white. Gosh, it's so crazy. Never forget that. Oh my gosh, it's so good to be with you. Anyway, love you guys.
All right. Good night, everybody.
See you later.
Sunday. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Good
Linda.
night.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Linda.
Bye, Linda.
Good night.